Most business owners, they think that a 10% success fee sounds really expensive until they try to sell the business themselves and they realize that they lost $400,000 in the contract stage because a buyer wrote a contract that they didn't understand. Look, I've sold 6 of my own personal companies. I've represented over 200 companies and sold them. That's an aggregate value of $400 million in businesses sold. My hard costs are somewhere between $100,000 and $150,000 a year just on the deals that I don't close. That's 25%, roughly 20% of the businesses that I can't sell. I'm still eating a lot of the legal costs, marketing costs, and any other costs that come with that just on the deals that don't close. Because my philosophy is this: I should only get paid when you get paid. I shouldn't get paid just for showing up. By the end of this video, you're gonna understand why 10% success fee is the cheapest money that you'll ever spend when you're selling and protecting your business on the closing day. Number 1, the real cost that you don't see coming. Look, you're not saving 10% by not going with a broker. You're exposing yourself to a 30 to 40% loss. You won't even know happened until the deal is closed and you realize what you could have gotten post-closing. Picture a seller that gets an offer for $2 million for his business that should have been valued at $3.2 million. The buyer's opening bid was 30% below market, and they made it low on purpose because they knew the seller didn't have an appraisal, didn't understand multiples, and was probably going to negotiate against himself out of fear that the whole deal would just fall apart if they said no. The seller pushed, they got the sale up to 2.4 million and walked away feeling like, I pushed him, I got a little bit more money, I won the negotiation. But in all seriousness, he left $800,000 on the table and he never knew it. That's what happens when you don't start this process without a proper appraisal. That's what happens when you start this process without a proper appraisal that the bank can use. You're really guessing at value. The buyer knows you're guessing and they price you accordingly. We perform the appraisal upfront prior to listing the business, the one that establishes the floor and gives the bank a defensible number against lowball offers. Without it, you're negotiating in the dark. While most buyers are going to work off of comps, multiples, and a playbook that you've never seen. Most sellers think in their head, look, I know what my business is worth because I run it every day. They know what comparable businesses sold last quarter, what multiples are moving, what lenders are willing to loan in this sector and in this industry. When you walk into a negotiation without an appraisal, you're bringing a guess to a fight where a buyer has data. The appraisal sets the floor. It's the line that you don't cross. It lets you walk away from lowball offers with confidence instead of sitting there and second guessing your position. If a buyer tries to push you below the appraised price, you know that they're not serious or they're testing you. Without it, every offer might feel like it's fair because you really don't have anything to anchor it into. Does that make sense? The number isn't the point. The protection is in the proof. That's the point. The appraisal protects you before you ever sit down at the negotiation table. But the threat doesn't wait for the table. It starts the day that you tell anybody that you're selling. And almost every seller walks straight into without realizing the damage that they've already done. The 10%, it doesn't feel like protection until you take 47 phone calls from unqualified buyers. Hand confidential financials to someone you don't know or even to your competitor and spend 6 months chasing a buyer and chasing a deal that was never going to close because they actually didn't have the money. Here's what the first 30 days of a listing actually looks like. 80 to 100 inquiries could come in. Maybe 10 of them are serious and actually qualified. The other 90 are tire kickers. They're interested, they see a business, they think it might be yours, and they're really just requesting info to see if they can figure out who's for sale out there in the marketplace. You don't think this happens, but I'm telling you, there are people that are just sniffing around that want to know if you're for sale and they want to tell their friends about it. I handle every phone call. I handle every bit of that. Every email that says I'm interested, can you send me the financials? I'm pre-qualifying every one of those buyers with a non-disclosure form, and they have to send me proof of funds. This can be a sticking point. There's a lot of buyers out there that don't like to do that. It's non-negotiable with me. There's absolutely no reason for me to send them your financials if they're not willing to share theirs with me. If they've only got $10,000 or $20,000, how are they going to buy a $2 or $3 million company? It's just not going to happen. I'm really, really strict about pre-qualifying buyers up front so that we don't waste any time, because one leak to the wrong person while you're selling it can destroy the entire process. You're talking to people that you don't know, handing them information that you can't take back, and you have no idea whether they're a real buyer or they're a competitor just fishing for info. The moment that your employees find out, productivity drops. The moment your best customers find out, they may get a little weary. And the moment that your competitors also find out, they potentially could be picking up the phone and calling your customers and letting them know. Confidentiality isn't a nice thing to have, it's mandatory. It's what keeps your business valuable when you're trying to sell it. You don't have time to do it when you're still trying to operate your company. So you gotta understand where the danger actually lives. The leaks, they don't happen at closing, they happen in the filtering. Every unqualified buyer that you talk to, that's a potential leak. Every financial package that you send out without pre-qualifying that buyer, that's a potential leak. What the 10% gives you is a firewall protection. I'm the one taking the heat, doing the filtering, protecting the confidentiality on the front line, while you keep running your business like nothing's happening. So you've kept the wrong people out and you've only allowed the right people in to view your business. Number 3, the devil is in the contract language. You can negotiate a great contract and still lose $300,000 in the offer because you didn't understand earnouts, the seller financing terms, the non-compete scope, or how the allocation of the purchase price actually maps post-closing. Here's a real example. A seller agrees to a $3 million purchase price. Feels great, shake hands. Then the contract comes through and it's got a working capital provision in it. That clause allows the buyer to reduce the price by the amount of working capital below a certain threshold at closing. The seller just lost $400,000 because he didn't even understand the working capital adjustment language in that contract. He needed to understand that working capital adjustments, there needs to be a threshold, and more importantly, they're negotiable. If he would have understood that, that would have protected him. There are dozens of clauses in these contracts that can do the same thing if you're not paying attention, if you're not familiar with the process. I write those offers. I negotiate that language. And the in-house law firm that we use, we see them every day. And we've seen every version of every trick in the book on how buyers try to claw back the price at closing. The hard part is making sure the contract actually delivers that price and it doesn't change at closing or post-closing. It doesn't allow them to chip away with earnouts, terms, conditions, and or adjustments. If you're not operating at that level, you're gonna lose. And here's where it really bites you. Once you sign the letter of intent, you're really locked in. You've taken the business off the market, you've committed to a buyer, and now you're in due diligence. If the contract language is bad and you try to renegotiate, the buyer knows you're stuck because starting over means 6 months and you've already told people that you're selling. Every clause in the purchase agreement is its own negotiation point. And if you don't know what you're looking at, you're negotiating blind. The 10% fee includes unlimited offer revisions, unlimited contracts, whether it's 1 or whether it's 10. Whether the buyer comes back 3 times, we handle all of it. You're not getting billed $400 or $500 an hour for these revisions. 1 offer, 10, it's all on us. And it's contingency based if we close your business. Number 4, what $130,000 a year in deals that actually don't close buys you. I close 75% of the deals that I represent. The industry average is 12%. The other 25%, that costs me anywhere from $100,000 to $150,000 a year just in hard costs. That's legal fees, that's time, that's escrow, that's contracts. These are costs that I never pass on to the sellers, despite them not closing and being funded on their deals. Because if I can't close your deal, then you shouldn't have to pay for my failure. Here's what happens on a deal that doesn't actually close. I've already put 40 to 60 hours into pre-qualifying and qualifying buyers, marketing, buyer calls, and the first rounds of negotiations. The law firm has drafted the non-disclosure agreement, the letter of intent, maybe even a first pass at a purchase agreement. We're into due diligence and then a buyer walks. They couldn't get financing, or maybe they found something in due diligence they didn't like and they decided to pass on the deal. Or they just got cold feet. None of those costs go to the seller. I eat the legal fees. I eat the time. I eat the opportunity cost of having worked the deal instead of another one. That's the bet that I'm making on myself when I decide to list your business. If I can't close it, I don't get paid. That's the type of alignment that you want on your side. The reason that most brokers charge a retainer or some type of upfront cost is they're not confident that they can close your business. And when you hire somebody with a 75% close rate against the industry average of 12%, you're hiring somebody who actually knows how to handle these transactions. They know how to handle things that kill deals. So here's how to use this when you're sitting across from your broker. Ask them 2 questions. What's your close rate? And do you charge anything up front? If they won't tell you their close rate or they want a retainer, you're talking to somebody who's not confident that they can deliver. The 10% is only expensive if the deal doesn't close. If the deal closes, it's the cheapest money that you'll ever spend because it bought you protection, expertise, and it delivered the result that you intended to get when you started this process. The 10% is insurance against the 30% that you'll never get back. Here's the math that matters. If your business is worth $3 million and you go without representation, you'll likely accept $2.1 to $2.5 million as an offer because you don't know what you don't know. You just saved 10%, but you lost 20 to 30% of the value. The 10% would have protected you from that loss. The losses happen in 4 different areas, and I want to walk you through the actual money. First, undervaluation. You think your business is worth $2.5 million because that's what a friend told you that it was worth or what you saw online. A proper appraisal says $3.2 million. You just lost $700,000 before you ever began. Second, bad negotiation. The buyer offers $2.8 million, you counter with $3 million, you settle at $2.9 million, and feel like you won. An experienced advisor would have held strong at $3.1 million, and they would have gotten it. They know when a buyer is in range and when they've actually hit their max. You left $200,000 on the table by negotiating scared, but really just negotiating alone. Third, you've got contract clawbacks, working capital adjustments, earnout triggers, seller notes that default. That's another $200,000 to $400,000 gone. And if you don't structure them correctly. Fourth, you got tax mistakes. Another $100,000 to $200,000 lost because you allocated the purchase price wrong. Added up, that's over $1.3 million in losses on a $3.2 million deal. You saved $320,000 in fees and you lost $1.3 million in 4 different ways inside of the value. That's not savings, that's a disaster. The reason that this happens to good, smart, honest people is that the losses, they're just invisible to you. But the buyer knows. They're operating at a level of sophistication that you're not equipped to match. And they're counting on every gap to get a better deal. This is where the operator-led advisory is different. So if you're serious about selling, here's the one thing to do first. Get the appraisal done. Not a back of the napkin estimate, not a friend who guessed, not a real estate appraisal or a friend who's in real estate can give you a number. Don't Google business valuation and just throw it into a calculator. That's not going to work. That's your starting point. And if you're already underwater on value, you'll know it and you'll waste 6 months. And understand this for what it is. The 10% is not a cost. It's insurance. You're insuring against undervaluation, bad negotiation, contract mistakes, and tax structure errors that will cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. You insure your home, you insure your car. Why wouldn't you want to insure your business sale? To ensure that you get maximum value and that you're protected along the way. It's the single biggest transaction of your life. My job is to protect you from the losses that you don't even know or that are sitting on the table. If you are thinking about selling your business and you want to know what it's actually worth, I provide a free $3,000 appraisal to qualified sellers. There's no obligation, no upfront costs, just real numbers, real advice. Click in the link in the description and we'll get one set up.